Yes, Raphael, we are live in Facebook on YouTube. Hello, everyone. Raphael, hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Aida. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you very much. So let's wait a few minutes.
Mhm.
Just our viewers can join us.
Sure. I'm really excited to be here virtually anyway, to have this connection with Kyrgyzstan, because as you know, I was in Kyrgyzstan for 2 years. Uh, so
Mhm.
it's really good to have this connection again.
We are also very happy to have you here in our session, Raphael. Thank you very much for joining us today and being with us.
Mhm.
So, yes, our friend joined us. So,
Sure.
good evening, dear friends, Bishkek American fans. Welcome to our Poetry During the Pandemic session. And it's my great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today, Raphael Dagold, an award-winning writer, photographer, a teacher from the United States. He has a PhD in literature and creative writing and Master of Fine Arts in poetry. And his first books were published in 2014. And his poems, lyric essays, and photographs are regularly published in literary journals. So from 2016 to 18, Raphael was an assistant of professor at the American University of Central Asia. His poems and photographs from Kyrgyzstan have appeared and are forthcoming in different literary and art journals. Thank you very much, Raphael, for being with us and for accepting our invitation. And also, I'm very excited also to participate in poetry during the pandemic session. Thank you very much, everyone. So, and also I want to kindly remind dear friends, please leave your questions, your comments during the live presentation, and after that, Rafael will answer them. So I think we can start, Rafael.
Okay, thank you so much for your introduction, Aida. As I was saying before we went live, I'm very excited to have this connection again with Kyrgyzstan. And right now I'm speaking to you from the United States, from the city of Baltimore, which is just 50 miles north of Washington, D.C. But for 2 years, I lived in Bishkek and taught at Alta. And so I taught first year seminar and some literature courses, and I taught creative writing. That is, I taught the writing of poetry. And one of the things that I learned when from my students when I was teaching there is that the teaching of poetry writing or fiction writing, that kind of writing of novels or stories or poetry, normally is not taught in school outside of the United States, nearly as much as it is inside the United States. So it might seem strange to the audience, to you who I'm talking to, it might seem strange that I have a PhD in creative writing. But that's something that in the United States you can get a PhD in writing of poetry, which is what I have. And so I was really happy to teach creative writing at ALTSA and had some very wonderful students. Another thing that I learned from my students at ALTSA was that, of course, most of the poetry that they had read was Russian poets because of the Russian language. And that a big difference between American poetry and Russian poetry is that American poetry, especially modern American poetry, poets talk about their personal lives. They talk about their personal problems. They talk about their family. They talk about things that would normally be embarrassing or even shameful. And what I learned from my students at ALSA is that Russian poets typically don't. They talk about the world, they talk about politics, they talk about social issues, perhaps. They talk about nature, the beauty of trees and things, but they don't share secrets of the self. But Americans are all about, hello, I just met you. Let me tell you my biggest secret. And American poets also do that in their poems. I also learned that my students at ALTSA expected poems always to rhyme, to have words that sound the same at the end of lines, and also to have a regular beat to them. But modern American poets mostly do not write poems that rhyme. And they also don't write poems that have a regular beat to them. And so sometimes I would present poems from American poets, and my students would say, that's not a poem because it doesn't rhyme. It doesn't have a and so it's just a different kind of poem. So today I'm going to read you some poems from American poets, and I will read you from poets who have been important to me. Because as Aida mentioned, I have published a book of poetry. I publish poems in literary journals. And so I'll read you poems from a few poets who have influenced me, and also poets who I am now reading, who I have read their work in the last 1 year and has been really impressed me a lot. And then I'll read some of my own work. So we'll see, try to keep track of time and do all of that in the next 20 minutes or so. So I'll begin with a poem, and I have these books with me here, so you won't just be looking at just my face this whole time, but I have these books, and I'll show you the books as I get to them. But this first poem that I'm going to read to you is, and Aida, am I speaking okay? Did you hear me?
Yes. Yes,
Good.
I can hear very well.
Okay, very good.
Thank you very much.
Okay, this poem, the first poem that I will read to you, is by a poet named Adrienne Rich, and Adrienne is a female name. This is a woman poet, and she started her poetry when she first started writing when she was young. Her poems were very, very careful, and they did rhyme, and they did have a regular beat to them. But then she started to write poetry that was about the wider world and was about politics. And she felt like this very tightly controlled poetry was like a small box, and she needed to get out of that box. So I'll read you this poem, and most of the poems that I will read you, I think that poetry during a pandemic, it occurred to me that poetry can connect the inside of an individual to the wide world. And so in doing that, it's not that poetry right now is a break from the world, but it's a way of connecting to the world so that we can maybe be more centered with ourselves and be possibly less anxious that there is a global pandemic around us, which of course we are very scared about. So perhaps this will help us, is my thought. So this poem is by Adrienne Rich. It is called Dedications. I know you are reading this poem late, before leaving your office, of the one intense yellow lamp spot and the darkening window, in the lassitude of a building faded to quiet long after rush hour. I know you are reading this poem standing up in a bookstore, far from the ocean on a gray day of early spring, faint flakes driven across the plain's enormous spaces around you. I know you are reading this poem in a room where too much has happened for you to bear, where the bedclothes lie in stagnant coils on the bed, and the open valance speaks of flight, but you cannot leave yet. I know you are reading this poem as the underground train loses momentum, and before running up the stairs toward a new kind of love your life has never allowed. I know you are reading this poem by the light of the television screen, where soundless images jerk and slide while you wait for the newscast from the Intifada. I know you are reading this poem in a waiting room of eyes met and unmeeting, of identity with strangers. I know you are reading this poem by fluorescent light in the boredom and fatigue of the young who are counted out, count themselves out at too early an age. I know you are reading this poem through your failing sight, the thick lens enlarging these letters beyond all meaning. Yet you read on because even the alphabet is precious. I know you are reading this poem as you pace beside the stove, warming milk, a crying child on your shoulder, a book in your hand, because life is short and you too are thirsty. I know you are reading this poem, which is not in your language, guessing at some words while others keep you reading, and I want to know which words they are. I know you are reading this poem, listening for something, torn between bitterness and hope, turning back once again to the task you cannot refuse. I know you are reading this poem because there is nothing else left to read, there where you have landed, stripped as you are.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the poem by Adrienne Rich, who was really a big influence on me as I started to write poetry.
It's very impressive, Raphael.
Mm,
So,
mm.
like describing like ordinary people's life, like.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Oh yes.
Yes, yes, exactly. And I think that that's what a poetry can do, is describe the ordinary things in a way that makes them large and magical at the same time as being still small, small and large at the same time. I think that I will, let's see, I think that I will read a poem by here. This one, I have the book, is by Philip Levine, right here. The book called What Work Is. And this book was very influential on me because Philip Levine writes about not just ordinary people, but people who work with their hands, like in factories. And for a lot of years, I worked with my hands. I was a woodworker. I made cabinets and furniture, and then I became a poet. So this poem is called Coming Close.
Mm-hmm.
Take this quiet woman. She has been standing before a polishing wheel for over 3 hours, and she lacks 20 minutes before she can take a lunch break. Is she a woman? Consider the arms as they press the long brass tube against the buffer. They are striated along the triceps, the 3 heads of which clearly show. Consider the fine dusting of dark down above the upper lip, and the beads of sweat that run from under the red kerchief across the brow and are wiped away with a blackening wristband in one odd motion a child might make to say, no, no, you must come closer to find out. You must hang your tie and jacket in one of the lockers in favor of a black smock. You must be prepared to spend shift after shift hauling off the metal trays of stock, bowing first, knees bent for a purchase, then lifting with a gasp the first word of tenderness between the two of you. Then you must bring new trays of dull, unpolished tubes. You must feed her, as they say in the language of the place, of the factory. Make no mistake, the place has a language, and if by some luck the power were cut, the wheel slowed to a stop so that you suddenly saw it was not a solid object, but so many separate bristles forming in motion a perfect circle, she would turn to you and say, why? Not the old why of why must I spend 5 nights a week, just why? Even if by some magic you knew, you wouldn't dare speak for fear of her laughter, which now you have anyway, as she places the 5 tapering fingers of her filthy hand on the arm of your white shirt to mark you for your own, now and forever.
It's a really great poem.
Yes, that book was very influential on me, and I still read his work very much. I met him in the once when I was in school for poetry, and he came to my university and gave a reading, and I thought that personally he was kind of a jerk, but his poetry is wonderful. So
Yes, it's a great poem, really.
thank you. I'm glad that you like that. I'm trying to figure out which ones to read now, and because I see the time and I want to get to all of these wonderful poems to read to you. I think that I will read from this book, which is called Bright Dead Things, poems by Ada Limon. And there's a picture of her here. I can show you, hold this up to the camera so you can see what she looks like there. There is Ada Limon, and she is a young poet. She is still writing today, and I only just discovered her. I only just started to read her in the last 1 year. And I think I'll just read one poem by her. And it is called How to Triumph Like a Girl. And this poem is partly about girls, partly about women, and partly about horses also. So it is a feminist poem. How to Triumph Like a Girl. I like the lady horses best, how they make it all look easy. Like running 40 miles per hour is as fun as taking a nap or grass. I like their lady horse swagger after winning. Ears up, girls, ears up. But mainly, let's be honest, I like that they are ladies. As if this big, dangerous animal is also a part of me. That somewhere inside the delicate skin of my body, there pumps an 8-pound female horse heart, giant with power, heavy with blood. Don't you want to believe it? Don't you want to lift my shirt and see the huge, beating, genius machine that thinks, no, it knows it's going to come in first? Isn't that, wouldn't you love to have the heart of a horse? So strong. Yeah.
Yes, I really like each poem that you read.
Oh, good.
It's very, very impressive. Thank you very much, Raphael.
Yeah. So I think I have time to read a couple of my poems.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. So I think that I'll read just maybe 3 of my poems. And here is my book. This is what it looks like.
Bastard Heart. Okay.
Yes, Bastard Heart. And the word bastard in English is usually a bad word. Usually it's a curse, and you call somebody that word when you are trying to insult them. But originally the word means a bastard is a child who was born from 2 parents who were not married. And so that's all that it means originally, but it came to be a curse. So this title, Bastard Heart, of the whole book. But I will read to you this one poem from this book that is called Learning to Eat Apples. And and as a note, when I was living in Bishkek, the apples in Kyrgyzstan were excellent apples. And there were all the different types of apples that I could get at the market. And I really, really enjoyed the apples from Kyrgyzstan and other fruit too. The strawberries in Kyrgyzstan were the best strawberries I've ever had in my life. And also the honey, best honey. So honey, apples, and strawberries. I miss I miss them from Kyrgyzstan. But this poem is about my father eating apples. And he would always, when I was small, like 4 years old, 5 years old, he would eat the apples, and then he would also eat the whole center of the apple with the seeds in it, which is called in English the core of the apple. What is that in Russian or Kyrgyz, Aida? And the apple core. Do you?
Yes, I know what you mean, but I forgot the word.
Okay.
The korочки внутри. I don't know how to say.
Okay, maybe one of the people watching can tell us.
Yes.
In Kyrgyz and in Russian, both. But he would eat the whole thing, and I would be astonished. And even when I was young, I knew that apple seeds had, if you eat a lot of apple seeds, it can poison you because it has a poison called cyanide in it, the apple seeds. If you eat just a few, it's okay. But so that's what you need to know from this poem. And so my brother and I are very small, and my father is driving us, and he is eating an apple. Learning to eat apples. My father is driving the blue Ford Falcon. So that's an old kind of car. My father is driving the blue Ford Falcon. I am in the back seat with my brother. We are on our way to the synagogue on Sunday morning. We have each had an apple and wonder what to do with the cores. Should we, after we have been through the whole sweet crunch, the skin, the juice mixing its sugary tang in our mouths, should we know what to do after the first bite of the whole fruit? After we have bitten off as much of the last pulp as we possibly can with our little teeth, should we know what to do with the cores? Maybe we should put them in the ashtray. Maybe that's what I say before our father says, "Here, give them to me, I'll eat them." Maybe our father doesn't really know what to do either, so he makes gnashing noises as he eats until the complicated middle is gone inside him. The plasticky slivers around the seeds themselves, whole or half chewed, down to his stomach, where I wonder if they will grow a little before he digests them, or if he will grow a resistance to the cyanide I know even then laces apple seeds. He puts the dry stems in the clean ashtray, and it's fun, our father being goofy, being silly. No one in their right mind would eat an apple core and like it. It is from a time before we were born, the frugal happiness and pleasure in efficiency. His large fingers bigger than the skinny cores, his answer to waste, simply not to end up with any. Our mother will pick us up after noon and take us to her house for the day, or maybe for the week if regular school has just let out and we have brought our suitcases. We will go with her into the city and our other life. Eating apples next time with our father, he will know what to do. And the time after that, he will pretend that he likes it, his favorite part, what he wants more than anything.
It's great.
Oh, thank you very much.
Very much.
Yeah. Should I read maybe one more poem and then we take questions?
Actually, our viewers are leaving positive comments and asking to read more poems. Can you please read one more?
Sure, I could read, maybe I can read two more.
Okay, great.
Yeah, if people want me to read more, I will read two more. And this one, so I have two manuscripts. That is, a manuscript is a book before it is a book. So I have
a
draft, yes, a draft, and that I am trying to get one of them published, and the other one I am still working on. And the manuscript, the draft that I am still working on, is poems about Bishkek and about Kyrgyzstan and my experience there. So I will read 2 poems from that, and so it only looks like this now. So it is poems from Regarding the Sluice Gates of Bishkek, a manuscript in progress. And a sluice gate is what you know as a Aida. Do you know the word? It is Arik. Oh, the Ariks, right?
Honestly, I don't know. What do you mean?
The Arik is where the water goes next to the street.
Arik, you mean? Okay,
Arik,
yes, I know.
Yes. And Arik, is it Arik pronounced like that? Arik, yes, okay, Arik. And so in the Ariks there are gates, right, that keep the water from flowing only a little bit. And so in English those are sluice gates, because an Arik is a sluice. That's the word. So so I will read you that poem first, the title poem of this manuscript, and then one more poem from this manuscript. Further regarding the sluice gates of Bishkek, none of them move. Not the massive blue gates of thick plate with adjustment wheels still intact. Not the gates sized as if for a child's schoolyard city, whether new or old, bright or mangled. Not the gates of Oak Park downtown. Not the sheet metal fixtures down Erkindik or beside fine gated courtyards. Not the lone gates beside disused footpaths in the southern micro-districts, or sluice gates at buzzing nodes of chain stores, flatbread shops, produce stalls, burger kiosks, and 24/7 pharmacies. None move, whether frozen up, down, halfway, or quarter, unless the gate is not a gate, unless fashioned by hand of a loaf-shaped stone, deflated soccer ball and rags, or a gate made of cast-off plywood and torn winter coats, made of fist-sized stones and packed dirt, of a piece of tire or inner tube and wind-felled branches, made of a square pillow and plastic doll and once again stones. Then their makers move them, adjust the water's path, deflect the mountain runoff's stream through apartment courtyards, along marshrutka routes and under sidewalk bridges, around backyards and into small lots of young trees, stalks of lavender flowers.
Wow.
And I'll read.
Really great, wonderful.
Thank you very much. I miss a lot of things about Bishkek, and that is one of them. In the summertime, the cold water running along the streets, and even when on a very hot day you walk along the sidewalk, and you can feel the cold from the running water, and in the middle of the city, and I really miss that. So I'll read you one more poem from my time in Bishkek.
Please, Raphael. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. I'm very happy to do this. This poem is called Metallurgy, and metallurgy means the science of metals, studying metal. Metallurgy. In Bishkek, green school doors and fuse box covers, green hallways in clinics, and in apartment buildings, green stairways. Medium green, chalky green, green dumpsters, trees, weeds whacked and unwhacked, green bottles run over, beside a stack of green melons at an alley kiosk. Green grapevines hanging on arbors fashioned of rebar. In sluices, summer runoff, so white with cold, I claim it too is green, though it is from the mountains, the water, where blue farm trucks haul sheep, bleeding alarm blue by small blue transformers, pushing amps the last length to village homes with ornate gable ends, painted two Russian blues, and into other homes with blue air breezing past open rafters, sun-faded blue of abandoned buses, blue machinery, bed sheets of blue draped on wires, blue sagebrush, blue lakes, snow atop peaks turning sky blue, blue sky, dusk blue, blue stars.
Wow. Again, it's really great, Raphael. So thank you very much. It's
Yeah,
really amazing.
you're welcome. I thank you for inviting me, and I'm very happy, to, as I said, to read these poems, and I there are many things that as I say, I miss about Bishkek and that I miss about Kyrgyzstan, and I'm very thankful for my time there, and it was a very inspiring place to me. It inspired a whole book of poems that I'm working on. I've written about 20 of them now, and I'll write about 20 more, and then try to publish the book. So.
Thank you very much. I'm so amazed by your work. Even I don't have any words to express my feelings.
Thank you, Aida. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we are starting to receive a lot of questions and comments. So let's start from the questions.
Sure.
The first question, you mentioned pandemic literature. What is the difference of pandemic and any other literature?
Sure. So pandemic literature, so when I started reading these poems, I said, well, yes, we are in a global pandemic, and I will read you poems with partly the purpose of just engaging ourselves with the wider world, with the thought that maybe will help us to feel less anxious during the pandemic. But none of the poems that I read to you were actually about the pandemic. None of them were about being sick, or illness, or the flu, or anything like that. So when when people say pandemic literature, they usually mean literature that is fiction or plays or poetry or other kind of literature that is about epidemics or pandemics. And so and some examples actually in and also television and movies. So examples in television, a recent example, I don't know if if you have seen the show The Walking Dead.
Oh, it's my favorite.
Yeah, okay. So the show The Walking Dead, the American television show The Walking Dead, is about a future or a time when a virus, some kind of sickness, has taken over the whole world, and the sickness turns people into zombies, right?
Yes.
So it is a zombie television show. Well, all zombie television shows and all zombie movies really are a kind of pandemic literature. It's a literature in film, but it's still an art form that it tells a story. So it can fall under the category of literature, even though it is movies. And so it's a pandemic literature because zombie movies are about a sickness that turns people into zombies. But to make a connection to literature from zombie movies, Mary Shelley, the writer of the novel Frankenstein, right, about the Dr. Frankenstein who built a quote unquote monster out of parts of bodies of dead people. Mary Shelley, after she wrote Frankenstein, she wrote another novel called The Last Man. And that novel is about, and this was written in the 19th century, so 1890, right about, or about 1890. And it is about a pandemic. It is about a virus or a sickness that takes over the entire globe, and everyone dies until only one person is left. And that one person writes their story. And the story that they write is the novel that Mary Shelley wrote. She wrote a novel as if she was the last man in the entire world writing a book about their story of being the last man. So pandemic literature exists now in The Walking Dead, but it started before. And there are other works of literature. I actually have one moment, I'll be right back. Just 1 second, let me grab this book.
Sure.
Yes,
Sure.
okay, hang on.
Dear friends, please type your questions, type your comments. So
this book right here, called The Man with Night Sweats, by Tom Gunn, poems by Tom Gunn, The Man with Night Sweats. This is one of it's actually the only book of poems that I know of. Not to say that there aren't others, but it's the only one that I know of, because, what do I don't know only a little bit, but anyway, it's the only poetry book that I know that is completely about a pandemic. And in this case, it's about the AIDS pandemic, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. And it's about in the 1980s in the United States. This poet was in San Francisco, and he writes about the city of San Francisco during the 1980s, and many people at that time were falling ill with AIDS and dying of AIDS, and before there were ways to keep it under control. Like today, people don't die because they have AIDS, but then people die. So this book is a book of poems about the AIDS pandemic. So that would be another work of pandemic literature.
Yes, so many examples. Thank you very much, Raphael.
Sure.
Thank you very much. So one more question. When will you visit Kyrgyzstan again?
Oh gosh, thank you for asking. As soon as possible. Maybe I might be able to do it next summer, or if not, then the summer after that. So maybe 2 years from now. I just recently got a job, a new job teaching at a private high school, and so I wouldn't be able to leave during the school year. So it would probably be some summer. But I've also thought about applying for a Fulbright fellowship to Kyrgyzstan, to travel around in the country, to take photographs, and to write more poems, and things like that, and maybe visit and give poetry, do this, but in person. Maybe go to village libraries and Bishkek libraries or American centers locations and things like that. I would love to travel and give poetry readings, maybe teach creative writing and things like that. And so it's on my mind to think about, to figure out.
Great news.
Yes.
Great news, Raphael. Thank you very much. The next question for you. You might know about other famous authors who created their works during the different pandemics. What's your favorite poem and why?
Oh gosh. Let me think. Gosh. I think that, I can't think of a favorite poem written during a pandemic, but I recently read an essay by the writer Virginia Woolf.
Yes.
Yes,
Mhm.
who the British English writer, not American, and she wrote one of her novels is called Mrs. Dalloway, and so it's about an upper class woman in London very soon after the First World War. And that novel is actually, I would call it a piece of pandemic literature because the main character, Mrs. Dalloway, suffers from a heart problem because she survived the 1918 influenza pandemic. She had the flu. But so in the 1920s, Virginia Woolf wrote an essay called On Being Ill. And her essay makes an argument, and it says that that literature does not talk about illness, like physical illness, and it should. She says it should talk about illness because when people are sick, when you're sick, you enter into a different kind of state of being. You have to lie in bed, and maybe you notice things that you didn't notice before. You don't go to work like you normally do, or you don't go to school, and so it takes you out of the regular state of being. And so she says that therefore literature, fiction and poems and other work of literature should also talk about physical illness, because illness takes you out of your regular life, just like literature takes you out of your regular life. So I just read that recently, and right now that is my favorite piece of writing about pandemics.
Great. Thank you very much for sharing this, Raphael. So the next question, I'm so many, I'm gonna check. I mean,
Yes,
we
of
receive
course.
questions from Facebook, from YouTube,
Sure.
from WhatsApp.
Yes.
And I'm like, ready to read. Tell us about your own library, please. It might be very huge. Are you leading online classes on literature now?
So my own, like my personal library at home. Is that what you mean? Like,
Yes.
well, I could show you.
Yes, please.
I don't have. Some of my books are still in boxes because I returned to the United States 2 years ago, and I now live in a kind of a small apartment, and so I still have a lot of my books in boxes. But I can take you around and I can show you. Here's some books I have just in these shelves right here. This is just in my office right here. And most of these books are poetry or are about poetry. And I have a few more books just right over there on my desk. That's my desk right there. But I'll take you along. I'll carry the laptop and I'll walk. I'll surprise my wife. She doesn't know that I'm coming out here. But coming out here. Hey, Barbara. Hi, Barbara. I'm coming out here live, and I'm showing my library here. So this is my this is the main books that I have right now, and all of these books right here are books of poetry, alphabetical. And it's not all the books of poetry that I own, but it's most of them. As I said, I still have lots of books in boxes. So I probably have twice as many, two times as many books as you see here, and also here on these shelves. This is all also poetry or books about poetry. And some of these books also along the top here are books of memoir. And memoir is a kind of literature where the writer talks about their own life. Like it's sort of like autobiography, talking about their own life. So some of these books are memoir, but most of them are books of poetry. And behind the television, Here's my television. I have also books you see
Wow.
right in there, behind there, and other books in my bedroom. And but there are boxes, and also in that cabinet right over there. If you open it, what's this? More library. Look at that. So
Wow.
you see, I have all over, and so that's and so most of my books are about poetry or are books
Mhm.
of poetry, but I also have other literature and books of fiction and things. But the most important books are the poetry books, and so those are the ones that I got out of the boxes and put on shelves. And when I moved to Kyrgyzstan to teach at Outsa, I shipped several boxes of books
Wow.
because I couldn't imagine being a professor without my books. Like I couldn't imagine thinking without looking at a shelf of books, because that's how I grew up. And so I know that it's different. For in the United States, it's a lot easier to get books than it is in some other places in the world, including in Kyrgyzstan. And but so for me, it was just I was used to it, and I couldn't imagine only being online. But people who are online with books all the time, it's different. But for me, I needed to have the thing, and so I had all those books in Kyrgyzstan also, like three boxes of books.
Your library is great. I'm really amazed. Thank you very much for showing your library.
Sure thing.
So the next question for you: who or what is your muse? What gives you an inspiration to create your works when you
Mm.
feel lost in your own writing?
Mm. Well, so I'll give two answers to that. One is if I sit and I know that I want to write a poem, but I don't know what it is about. I just feel like I have a poem inside me somewhere, and I need to figure out what that is. And so I sit down and I think that it's I try to locate in my head and in my heart something that is bothering me, something that I don't understand, something that I can't make sense of, I can't figure out. And so I want to write the poem to try to figure it out, whether that's an emotional thing or an intellectual thing or a spiritual thing, and or something about the way that I relate to the rest of the world or the way that I relate to another individual. There is some disconnection, and I write the poem to try to figure out what that is. Not really to come to an answer, because I don't think that a poem should give a final answer. If a poem gives a final answer, then it's like a greeting card. Don't worry, you are okay. Like that's not what I think what a poem should do. I think a poem should help us to think or help us to feel, but not to give us a final answer, because then we read a poem and we're like, oh, okay, I understand. And then you put the poem away and you never think about it again. I think that a poem you should continue to think about. So it's a way to figure something out. But another thing that gives me inspiration, that is a muse for my poetry, the poem that I read to all of you from Bishkek about the sluice gates, about the Areks.
Yes, you're right.
So in that poem, I think if you can remember, you heard there were specific details about city streets and buildings and iron gates and the street named Erkindik Boulevard and the burger kiosks and 24/7 pharmacies um, and cities. Really, the details of cities really do inspire me, and in particular, kind of the mixture of how cities are always, not always, but are mostly, there's parts of cities that are broken down, that have cracks in them, sidewalks with cracks, and buildings that are only partly built, or like graffiti, written on the side of buildings. But then also right next door, a new building, shiny steel and glass, and then people walking by who are a professional with a suit and tie, and then someone else who is walking by who maybe is very poor and hungry also at the same time. And so city is this place where many different things come together in the same place. Cities really are inspiring to me. In particular, it started for me, the city where I was born, Baltimore, which is where I live right now. Again, but I was born in the city of Baltimore, and so this city was very emotionally connected to me. And I think that is where I started to become interested in cities. And then when I moved to Bishkek, it was like Kyrgyzstan's Baltimore. Right? And so I think that it was because I was connected to my own city of Baltimore that I felt a connection to Bishkek. And both cities there's new things and old things and broken things and fixed things and rich people and poor people, and that mixture in both cities, Baltimore and Bishkek.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for your answer, Raphael. It's really great. Oh, you're really like source of inspiration for our audience also.
Oh, good. Oh, good. I hope I'm not taking too long answering questions. I know that there are a lot of questions.
Okay. It's okay. So please share who pushed you to become a writer?
My parents encouraged me to read a lot, and because I read a lot, I started to think when I was in maybe when I was a teenager, I started to think that writers of stories and poems understood something about the world, that I thought that writers were the most wise people in the world. And I thought, I want to be like them. I admired them because I thought that they were the smartest people in the world and the most interesting, and that they saw things about the world which made me interested in the world and made me interested in trying to understand myself also. And so it was because of that. It was all because of reading. And then I guess seeing poets read their own work when I was in college, and sometimes when I was at a university, sometimes poets would come to the university and give readings, and I was just so inspired that the sound of their voice with the words that they were reading from the page that they had written was something. It was like a music for me. And my father, he was an engineer, and so he was math and science, right, person. My mother is an artist, a visual artist. And so when I heard poets read their work and could hear the music of their voice, and also how precise the meanings of the words are with poems, I think that it was like, I mean, I didn't think about it this way at the time, but looking back in the past, I think that for me, it was like combining qualities of my father and my mother. My father with the precise mathematics of and therefore in poems, the precision and specificity of the language, and then the music of the voice being like the art of my mother and her paintings. So for me, it was like, I can make them both happy.
Great. It's really wonderful. Thank you very much, Raphael. So, could you please tell us more about your website, raphaeldagold.com?
Oh, yes. Please visit my website, www.raphael.com. I created the website after my first book was published. This book right here, which when AUCA opens again, is it closed because of the pandemic? Probably.
I think so, yes, it's
probably.
closed.
When it opens again, you can find my book in the AUCA library. There's a copy of it in the library, so you can go and read it. You can also buy it from Amazon. If you can ship it to Kyrgyzstan, you can buy it on Amazon. But anyway, go to my website, and my website has some of my poems on the website. It has links to some of my poems that have been published in online journals, because some literary journals are online and you can read them from your computer. And so there are links to my work online. And also, my website has a section of photographs from Kyrgyzstan. And so you can see some of the photographs that I took when I was there. And in August, 2 of my photographs from Kyrgyzstan will be published in a literary and art journal called North American Review, along with 2 of my poems. So you can see the mention of all of those things, and on my website, www.raphaeldagold.com.
Yes, please visit this website. Thank you very much, Raphael, for sharing this. So we received a lot of comments from Aidar. Yes, he's really amazed by your poems and invites you to his house, like be a guest.
Wonderful. That would be great. I really, I want to, I hope to come to Kyrgyzstan soon as I can. And so when I do, I will contact Aida. I will contact you, and you will get in touch with Aidar, and he will invite me to us.
Okay, thank you very much, Raphael. So the next question for you: what kind of photographer you are? What exactly do you usually shoot?
I don't know if you can still hear me. You are frozen, Aida.
Oh, really? Do you hear me, Raphael? Raphael, do you hear me? Raphael? Raphael, do you hear me?
You're kind of frozen. The connection isn't working quite right.
Oh, really? I'm really sorry for my internet. It's getting really bad. Do you hear me now? Oh, Raphael? Still.
Aida, I don't know if I don't know if you can hear me clearly. You were kind of frozen. It wasn't working quite, the connection. Could you repeat the question again?
Yes. Do you hear me now?
Yes. Now.
I'm really sorry for my internet. It's really getting bad.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead. Ask the question again. It wasn't working. Okay, go ahead.
So what kind of photographer you are? What exactly do you usually shoot?
Let's see. Let me see if I might be able to show you, if I can figure it out on my computer while I'm talking. But well, when I was saying about cities, the way that cities inspire my poetry, in the same way the cities inspire my photography. So buildings and shapes in the city but also in natural areas. I don't photograph people very much because I'm too shy. But I wonder if I can. Let me see if I can show you. Actually, I think that I can do this. And let me see here. Okay, here.
Do you want to share your screen?
Yes, I'm getting my screen up, and then I will share the screen. And what I'll do is I'll show you these. It's let me see. Yes, okay. This is I just got the what are called page proofs for the pages in the journal that will be published in August in the journal called North American Review, with 2 of my photographs and 2 of my poems, all from Kyrgyzstan. So let me just figure this out. I will get with you in just 1 second. Okay. Share screen. Okay, I'll share screen and then I will. Okay,
choose entire screen.
Okay. There. So, can you see that photograph?
No.
Oh, no.
No. Yeah, you have to choose like share screen and again share screen and choose the entire screen and then
Okay.
share. Yeah, I mean it's a really difficult process.
Oh, okay. Okay, your entire screen, share. Let's see. I don't know why it's not working. Oh, there we go.
Oh, yes.
Now? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, now here.
Yes. Oh.
Yes?
Yes.
There we go.
We're able to see your screen.
Yeah, so this is a photograph from behind Alza. In one winter day, I went walking behind Alza, and I saw the fog and the snow. It was very, very beautiful and covered all the plants and the trees. And so then I took this photograph, and you can see this shipping container for that would go onto ships. And of course, these shipping containers are around Bishkek and are used for different things. And this one, I think, was just abandoned. I think it was empty there in the field. So it just struck me that it was very beautiful. So beauty is very important to me as a photographer, but also that it's not beautiful like only nice and happy, but also kind of sad also at the same time. Here is this abandoned shipping container. What is it doing here in the field? Why did somebody have it there? What did they use it for? Why did they leave it there? But also at the same time, it's red and beautiful in this field of ice and fog. And then this photograph here. This was we went to Songkul, the lake up in the mountains, and driving back down the mountain, I saw this green Lada, and I really liked the old Ladas, and this green one with the snow. It just again, it was that same kind of. There was no one in it. This car, there was no one driving the car. There was just sitting there. So it was the same kind of. It is very beautiful, but also sad and a little bit disturbing because it is just abandoned there. Why is it there? Who owns the car? Why aren't they with the car? Are they okay? These questions come up in this beautiful landscape. So hopefully that would help. So I'm very happy. This will be published in a magazine in August. So
Wow.
yeah.
It's really impressive and it's
Thank
very
you.
stunning. Thank you very much, Raphael, for sharing
Sure,
this.
sure. I just did stop sharing there.
Mhm.
Okay.
If it's possible right now, can we ask you to read your poem, Autumn Drive?
Oh, yeah, sure. Let me find that. Okay. This poem is called Autumn Drive, and it is about that trip to Sangkul, and and it is also about one of the one of the things that was very interesting to me in Kyrgyzstan was the Muslim cemeteries, which, as you know, of course, these cemeteries have not just grave markers, but like almost like miniature buildings, like as if the whole cemetery, the whole graveyard, is a small city, and that was very interesting to me to see that. So this poem is partly about that, as you will hear. Autumn Drive. The cemetery's metal crescents glint across the road from the corrugated roofs of the village, each crescent aloft above an 8th scale stucco structure. And I quote Lewis Mumford, who proclaimed, "The city of the dead antedates the city of the living." And my friend Bill, a trained philosopher, objects, "That can't possibly be true." It's my birthday, early October, and we are driving 5 hours up into the Ala-2 range, Sky Mountain, to a lake, Sangkul. Oh, it gets worse, I tell Bill, as, according to Mumford, urban life spans the historic space between the earliest burial ground for dawn man and the final cemetery, the necropolis. So it's not just the living begot from the dead, but it's the dead who survive, whose cities persist, whose infrastructure practically maintains itself, bridges perennially stout, aqueducts ever clear. In the morning, early snow sweeps nearly sideways, and we drive back, winding through a landscape suddenly white, steep slopes with dots of black sheep, cattle crowding 2 lanes into one, a green Lada with aluminum roof rack, and no driver, no passengers in sight. And when we stop for a break at a bend in the road where cast-off rail cars, painted sky blue and white, line the way on blocks, a herd of lithe horses runs single file past, down from the driven snow, toward where others too remain unfrozen.
Oh, I'm really like your poems.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
very much,
much.
Raphael.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank
This
you.
was our last comment and last question from our audience.
Mhm.
And I think we are close to finish our session. And
Okay.
thank you very much for sharing your favorite poems, reading your own, and showing us your library. It's amazing.
Thank
And I
you.
really like our session. It was really interesting and
I really had
informative
a great time.
and
I had a
healing.
wonderful time. Yes.
Thank you very much, Raphael. And thank you very much for our viewers for your active participation, your comments
Mhm.
and questions.
Also, Aida, is Aigirim in the audience?
I think so.
Aigirim, Barbara says hello.
Wow. Thank you very much, Raphael. So
Thank
it's
you.
time to say goodbye.
Okay.
Yes, it was a really long session, but it was really interesting.
I had a wonderful time, and I will have a wonderful day. It's still morning in the United States. I will have a wonderful day because of this event today. So thank you very much.
Have a great day. And
Okay.
for those who are watching us from Kyrgyzstan, have a great evening.
Yes.
Bye, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you very
Goodbye.
much.
Goodbye. Thank you.